Clarity of thought is not a gift from the universe. It is a silent curse that turns every moment of stillness into a psychological torture chamber. While the world sleeps in the comfort of its superficial certainties, there exists a type of mind that cannot rest, that cannot simply exist without questioning, without analyzing, without tearing the veil of appearances until bleeding against the truth. Carl Jung understood this with surgical precision. The so-called gift of intelligence, of amplified consciousness, is not the prize that society seeks to celebrate. It is a permanent exile from the paradise of ignorance, a condemnation to see what others cannot see and to carry the weight of that vision in absolute solitude. Thinking too much is not simply having many thoughts. It is the inability to turn off the engine of consciousness, to live on the surface where comfortable certainties and convenient truths reside. It is being trapped in a perpetual loop of analysis where each decision becomes a maze of possibilities. Each social interaction, a mask theater that only you can see. Each moment of happiness, a suspicion that something deeper and darker lurks beneath. Jung described the shadow, that psychic territory where we deposit everything we do not want to acknowledge about ourselves. But for those who think too much, the shadow is not an abandoned basement. It is a lit room they cannot stop entering, again and again, examining every corner, every crack, every disgusting truth about human nature and about themselves. Society celebrates intelligence in the abstract, but punishes its concrete manifestation. It wants people smart enough to be productive, but not so much as to question the system that exploits them. It wants minds that solve technical problems, but not those that identify the existential issues underpinning the very structure of civilization. The deep thinker becomes a threat not because they are violent or destructive, but because their mere existence exposes the fragility of collective narratives. Their ability to see patterns, connect points that others ignore, and recognize the fundamental contradictions in which everyone participates makes them an uncomfortable mirror reflecting systemic hypocrisy. Jung understood that the process of individuation, this path towards psychological wholeness, is not a romantic adventure of self-knowledge. It is a descent into personal hell where every illusion must be confronted and destroyed. For the excessive thinker, this process is not optional. It is constantly happening, without respite, without the possibility of merciful forgetfulness. Every social interaction becomes material for analysis. Why did he say that? What does it reveal about his true intentions? What does my reaction say about my own unhealed wounds? The brain does not rest because it has been trained or cursed to seek meaning in every stimulus, to build and deconstruct narratives until reality itself becomes a collection of fragmented interpretations. The solitude of the deep thinker is not circumstantial. It is ontological. There is an insurmountable distance between those who have seen too much and those who remain comfortable in consensual blindness. Superficial conversations become unbearable, not out of intellectual arrogance, but because of the impossibility of turning off the critical apparatus that constantly detects evasions, contradictions, and pious lies that sustain the social fabric. Schopenhauer expressed this with his characteristic pessimism. Life is suffering, and consciousness is the mechanism that amplifies that suffering until it becomes an unbearable experience. The excessive thinker cannot enjoy the opium of the masses because their mind constantly rejects the anesthetic of comforting beliefs. Jung identified that neurosis, that psychic distortion that causes so much individual suffering, arises from the conflict between the demands of the conscious ego and the realities of the unconscious. For most, this conflict remains in the shadows, generating symptoms that can be ignored or medicated. For those who think too much, the conflict is a lit battlefield where every tension is visible, every contradiction is palpable, every defense mechanism is transparent. There is no refuge in denial because the analytical mind has demolished all escape routes. The existential anguish that accompanies excessive thinking is not abstract. It manifests in decision paralysis, where each option branches into infinite possible consequences. It manifests in the inability to rest, where the brain continues processing information even during moments that should be for repose. It manifests in the perpetual feeling of being out of sync with the world, of being a strange observer in a play where all the other actors know their lines, but you only see the artificiality of the production. Jung spoke of the archetype of the wounded sage, that figure who gains knowledge through suffering and carries that wisdom as a burden. The overthinker embodies this archetype without having chosen it. Their knowledge does not come from books or mystical experiences, but from the simple act of being unable to stop observing, of being unable to suspend critical judgment, of being unable to participate in collective fictions with the innocence of someone who does not see the seams of reality. This knowledge brings neither power nor peace. It only brings a clear vision of how fragile and arbitrary the structure is upon which we all build our lives. Modern psychology has pathologized excessive thinking under labels such as rumination, generalized anxiety, or obsessive disorder. But these diagnostic categories hide a deeper truth that Jung intuited. Not all psychological suffering is dysfunction. Part of that suffering is the natural and appropriate response of a mind that refuses to accept the simplifications necessary for mental peace. It is the price of lucidity in a world that rewards functional blindness. The medical system offers medications that reduce brain activity, silencing the circuits of excessive analysis, and in many cases, this is necessary for basic survival. But it is important to recognize what is being silenced. It is not simply a biochemical malfunction. It is a form of consciousness that has seen too much to return to the comfort of not seeing. Jung distinguished between common neurosis, a product of unresolved personal conflicts, and what we might call existential neurosis, a product of confronting the fundamental truths of human existence. The overly thoughtful person constantly lives in this second realm. Every day is a negotiation with the absurdity of existence, with the arbitrariness of meaning, with the inevitable dissolution of everything we build. While others may postpone these questions, delegate them to religion, or ignore them through distraction, the mind that cannot stop thinking is constantly facing the abyss, observing it, measuring it, recognizing that the abyss is also observing it. Contemporary culture has commercialized the thinker's anguish. Self-help books promise techniques to calm the mind, to live in the present, to achieve inner peace. These solutions are not entirely useless, but they often ignore that for certain minds, stillness is not an attainable state. Overthinking is not a habit that can be unlearned through breathing exercises. It is a fundamental configuration of consciousness, a way of being in the world that cannot simply be reprogrammed with positive mantras. The cruel paradox is that deep thinking, which should be a tool to understand and navigate reality, becomes an obstacle to living that reality. Jung observed that many of his most intelligent patients were also the most paralyzed, not due to lack of ability, but because of excess vision. They saw so many possibilities, potential dangers, and ramifications of each decision that action itself became impossible. Intelligence, taken to its extreme, creates a form of paralysis where clarity about options destroys the ability to choose. This paralysis extends beyond practical decisions. It affects the ability to form genuine emotional connections. The overthinker constantly analyzes their own emotions, questioning their authenticity, searching for the hidden motives behind each feeling. Love becomes a phenomenon to be dissected, friendship a transaction to be evaluated, joy a temporary state to be mistrusted because it will inevitably end. This hyper-emotional awareness does not produce greater connection. It creates distance, a layer of analysis that stands between direct experience and the subject experiencing it. Jung identified that symbols and myths serve as bridges between the conscious and the unconscious, as forms of communication that transcend linear logic. But for the analytical mind, even symbols become objects of analysis. The ability to directly feel the power of a symbol, to allow it to resonate on preconscious levels, is blocked by the constant impulse to decode, to translate, to reduce mystery to a rational explanation. The overthinker lives in a world where everything is text to be interpreted, where nothing can simply be experienced without being simultaneously analyzed. The relationship with time is particularly tortuous for those who cannot stop thinking. The past is not a closed territory. It is constantly revisited, reinterpreted, remade through new layers of analysis. Each memory is examined under new lights. Each past decision is reevaluated with present information. Each mistake is amplified by the retrospective understanding of all the alternatives that were not taken. The future also offers no escape. It becomes an infinite field of anticipatory anxiety, where each future possibility is explored to its ultimate consequences. And the present, that moment we are supposed to inhabit, is constantly interrupted by the intrusions of reanalyzed past and hyper-examined future. Jung believed in the possibility of integration, of achieving a synthesis between psychic opposites. But this synthesis requires an acceptance capacity that is particularly difficult for the analytical mind. Accepting means letting go, allowing things to be without the need to fully understand them. For someone programmed to seek meaning in everything, this surrender is almost impossible. Every potential moment of stillness is invaded by the question of why I should be still, what function stillness serves, and whether stillness itself is not another form of evasion. The culture of performance and productivity has taken this suffering and turned it into capital. The overthinker is valued in certain professional contexts precisely for their inability to turn off the brain, for their tendency to identify problems that others do not see, to anticipate complications, to generate complex analyses. But this valuation is purely extractive. Society wants the products of overthinking without recognizing the psychological cost involved. It wants innovation and critique, but does not want to deal with the person who cannot stop innovating and criticizing, who applies that same analytical scalpel to all structures, including those they are supposed to respect. Jung spent years exploring his own unconscious, documenting his visions and dreams in what would become the Red Book. This process was not therapeutic in the conventional sense. It was an immersion into psychic chaos that almost destroyed him. For the overthinking thinker, each day is a less dramatic but equally exhausting version of this process. There is no need for special techniques to access the unconscious, when the conscious mind is constantly breaking through the barriers of repression, when every random thought can become an entry into the tunnel of obsessive introspection. The social isolation experienced by the deep thinker is not only a product of their inability to connect, it is also the result of the rejection they generate in others. The person who constantly questions, who does not accept superficial explanations, who points out contradictions in collective narratives, becomes an uncomfortable presence. Social groups operate based on a certain level of unexamined consensus, of implicit rules that everyone agrees not to question too much. The overthinker constantly violates this social contract, not out of malice, but due to an inability to participate in the shared fiction. Jung acknowledged that certain individuals are called to live outside the collective norms, to serve as explorers of the psychic territories that most avoid. But this calling is not glorious. It is a condemnation to marginality, to misunderstanding, to the constant feeling of translating between two languages that no one else speaks. The excessive thinker does not choose this position. They find themselves there, expelled from the paradise of simplicity, unable to believe again in the narratives that once gave them structure. The search for meaning becomes a prison when there is no possibility of finding a satisfying meaning. The deep thinker searches and searches, builds and deconstructs systems of meaning, only to find that each system has its cracks, its blind spots, its arbitrary foundations. Philosophy does not offer definitive answers. Science explains the how, but not the why. Religion demands faith where the analytical mind can only offer skepticism. And so, the search continues, not because there is hope of finding, but because the mind can do nothing else but search. Jung warned about the dangers of psychic inflation, of identifying too much with the archetypes of the collective unconscious. For the excessive thinker, the opposite danger is equally real: psychic deflation, where awareness of one's limitations, the futility of efforts, the cosmic insignificance of individual existence, crushes any sense of purpose or value. The balance Jung prescribed between consciousness and unconsciousness, between ego and shadow, between the personal and the collective, is a balance that requires a delicate dance. For those who think too much, each step of that dance is hyperconscious, calculated, stripped of the grace that comes from spontaneity. The persistent question is whether this mode of existence can be redeemed, whether there is any way to live with this curse that is not simply surviving until the next day. Jung would suggest that the answer lies in integration, in accepting the shadow, in recognizing that overthinking is part of the totality of being, and not something to be eradicated. But this acceptance is itself a process that the analytical mind tends to sabotage. Each moment of acceptance is immediately questioned. Is this acceptance genuine, or just another form of evasion? Am I integrating my shadow, or simply rationalizing my dysfunction? The act of accepting becomes another object of analysis, stripped of its transformative power by the very consciousness seeking transformation. Contemporary culture offers endless distractions, ways to keep the mind occupied so it doesn't have to face itself. Social media, constant entertainment, immersion in fictional narratives, all of these are strategies to avoid silence where deep thoughts emerge. For most, these distractions work well enough. For the overthinker, even distractions become material for analysis. The act of distraction is observed and criticized. Dependence on distraction is recognized as a symptom of something deeper. And so, even escape from thought becomes another layer of thinking about thinking. Jung believed that the goal of life is not happiness, but meaning. But for those who think too much, meaning is precisely the problem. There are too many possible meanings, too many interpretations, too many layers of symbolism and contextualization. The search for meaning becomes a spiral where each answer generates 10 new questions, where every moment of clarity is followed by a recognition of how much more there is that is not understood. Meaning, instead of being an anchor, becomes a horizon that constantly recedes, always visible but never attainable. The body also suffers under the weight of excessive thinking. Mental tension translates into physical tension. The muscles remain contracted, the nervous system in a state of perpetual alertness, sleep interrupted by the inability to turn off the internal dialogue. Jung understood the connection between psyche and soma, how psychological conflicts manifest in physical symptoms. For the obsessive thinker, the entire body becomes a record of mental suffering, a map of tensions reflecting the unresolved knots of consciousness trapped within itself. The temptation of nihilism is almost inevitable. If every analysis leads to the arbitrariness of meaning, if every structure reveals itself as a fragile construction, if all certainty dissolves under scrutiny, then why not embrace futility? Nihilism offers a perverse form of peace, the peace of having stopped searching, of having accepted that there is nothing to find. But even this position is unsustainable for the analytical mind. Nihilism itself becomes another philosophical stance to be examined, criticized, found insufficient. There is no rest even in total negation. Jung spoke of the need for personal myths, narratives that give structure and direction to individual life. But creating a personal myth requires an act of faith, a voluntary suspension of skepticism. The overthinking thinker can intellectually recognize the usefulness of such a myth, can even consciously construct one, but cannot avoid seeing the construction, the scaffolding that supports the narrative. The myth loses its power when it is transparently recognized as useful fiction. Magic requires a degree of credulity that the hyper-analytical mind has permanently lost. Comparison with others becomes another source of torment. The deep thinker observes people who seem to live with ease, who make decisions without paralysis, who sleep without insomnia, who enjoy simple pleasures without questioning them. This observation generates a toxic mix of envy and contempt. Envy for the peace they experience, contempt for the ignorance that makes that peace possible. But this contempt is immediately recognized as a defense mechanism, as a way to rationalize one's own suffering, and thus another layer of self-awareness is added to the burden already carried. The question of whether it is worth living this way has no clear answer. Jung would say that each individual must find their own path to individuation, but what happens when the path itself is the problem? When the process of individuation, of becoming conscious, causes more suffering than it resolves. When the clarity gained does not illuminate an exit, but only the magnitude of the labyrinth. The answer could be that there is no choice, that for certain psychic configurations, overthinking is not an option, but a condition, something to be managed rather than resolved. Living with this cursed gift requires developing survival strategies, small rituals that create islands of order in mental chaos, activities that occupy the mind enough to prevent the spiral, but not so much as to become another source of analysis. Relationships with people who can tolerate the intensity without being crushed by it. Moments of creativity where overthinking is channeled into something productive. These strategies do not cure the condition, but make it possible to move forward, day after day, carrying the amplified consciousness like a backpack that can never be left behind. Jung spent the last part of his life withdrawing more and more from the world, building a tower in Bollingen where he could be alone with his thoughts and his work. For many deep thinkers, some form of retreat is inevitable. not as escapism, but as a recognition that the world is designed for minds that function differently, and forcing oneself to fit into unsuitable structures causes more harm than good. Retreat does not solve the problem of overthinking, but at least it removes the additional layer of suffering that comes from constant social maladaptation. Society needs deep thinkers, even if it doesn't know how to care for them. It needs people who see what others do not see, who question what others accept, who bear the weight of amplified consciousness so that occasionally their insights can filter into the collective consciousness. But this social role does not make the burden lighter. The deep thinker does not find comfort in the fact that their suffering may be useful to others. Usefulness does not mitigate the burden. Is there any way out of this labyrinth, or only paths that traverse it slightly less painfully? Jung would suggest that the way out is to go through it completely, not to avoid any corner of the shadow, to integrate everything found until reaching a wholeness that transcends suffering. But for someone living in the labyrinth every day, this promise of wholeness may seem as distant as the horizon line, always visible but never closer, no matter how much one walks. And so we arrive at the mirror that Jung knew we all must eventually face. This is not a text about others. It is about recognizing that if you have come this far, if these words resonate with something inside you, then you already know what it is about. You already know the weight of unceasing thought, the loneliness of seeing what others do not see, the curse of clarity in a world that prefers fog. The question is not whether you can escape your own mind. The question is what you will do with the consciousness you have been forced to carry. Will you turn it into something that justifies the suffering it causes? Will you find moments of grace within the torment? Or will you simply survive, day after day, until the thought finally stops? Jung cannot answer this for you. No one can. The only certainty is that now, at this moment, while you read this, your mind is already analyzing these questions, breaking them down, looking for cracks, unable to simply feel without also thinking about the feeling. And perhaps, just perhaps, in that recognition, there is something akin to an answer, or at least a way of peace with the absence of answers.